All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring a pretty wild paradox. The exact foods that literally built the human brain over the last 2 million years would, without a doubt, get a restaurant completely shut down today. We're talking no labels, no expiration dates, and definitely no FDI inspectors. Just raw, unpasteurized fuel. We're going to really dig into this massive disconnect between the super strict safety codes of our modern food supply and the raw, ancient evolution of our very own digestive systems.
Think about the sheer contrast here. On one side, you have our everyday grocery store reality, sterile, shrink-wrapped aisles, everything stamped with FDA approvals and rigid expiration dates. But on the other side, you have the ancestral diet, an honestly intimidating menu featuring deliberate decomposition and raw organs. If you tried to sell your great-great-ancestors' premium dinner today, you'd face immediate legal consequences. But, as we're about to see, they weren't just eating whatever garbage they could find to survive. They were actually biological experts.
To really map out this dietary gap, we're breaking this explainer down into 4 quick parts. 1. Fermentation before fire. 2. Organs over muscle meat. 3. The Hadza honey paradox. And 4. Ancient software, modern hardware.
Let's start with part 1, fermentation before fire, the science of deliberate decay.
For the longest time, we just assumed our ancestors ate rotten food out of pure, desperate starvation. But paleoanthropologist John D. Speth proved that they actually sought it out intentionally. They would take a fresh hunt, like a walrus or a caribou, and purposefully leave it out to decompose, sometimes for weeks at a time. We are talking about meat that was literally liquefying at the edges. An FDA inspector would probably faint just looking at it. Early European explorers were totally sickened by the stench, but to the foragers, this was a Michelin-starred dinner. In fact, when village elders were offered either fresh meat or this putrid meat, they actively chose the rotting option because they considered it way easier to digest.
I know, it sounds absolutely disgusting to us today, but biologically speaking, they were running a highly sophisticated operation. Speth's research showed that they were actually utilizing specific lactic acid bacteria. These microorganisms move into the decomposing meat and create an anaerobic environment that actively suppresses the really dangerous pathogens. It's the exact same biological science a modern food scientist uses to cure salami or aged cheese. The only difference? One gets a fancy USDA stamp of approval and the other gets your food license instantly revoked.
And here is the truly shocking twist. This ancient preservation system worked flawlessly for tens of thousands of years. Major botulism outbreaks in the Arctic only really began spiking in the 1970s and 80s. Why? Well, because modern health workers showed up to fix traditional practices with sanitary Euro-American methods. When we replaced their ancient, fine-tuned system with our modern one, people actually started getting sick.
Okay, moving to part 2. Organs over muscle meat, redefining the premium cut. Our modern supermarket logic is completely backward compared to how our ancestors thought. That FDA-approved muscle meat we pay top dollar for at the butcher, to them, that was practically just filler. The true prizes, the parts they would literally fight over first, were raw brains, testicles, raw intestines with the digested content still inside, and amniotic fluid. Every single item in that ancestral premium category is highly illegal to serve commercially today. Raw brains carry severe prion risks, and serving uncleaned intestines violates just about every basic sanitation code on the books. But they had a brilliant reason for eating this way, and it wasn't some early wellness trend. Throwing away the organs meant throwing away the absolute most nutritionally dense parts of the entire animal. Liver has an unmatched density of vitamin A, B12, and iron. Brain tissue is incredibly dense in DHA, which happens to be the exact omega-3 fatty acid required to build human neurons. So the muscle meat was really just basic calories to keep them moving, but the organs? Those were the essential building blocks for the human brain itself.
Which brings us to part 3, the Hadza honey paradox, a biological contradiction.
To understand this, researchers spent over 900 hours observing the Hadza people in Tanzania who still forage today. And what they found is mind-blowing. While out hunting, a staggering 85% of the men's calories didn't come from meat at all. It came from raw, unpasteurized honey. A Hadza man will literally tear open a wild beehive with his bare hands and eat the honeycomb right there in the tree, complete with wax, pollen, and live bee larvae. Across their whole population, this raw, unfiltered honey makes up about 15 to 20% of their total daily calories. Now, in the modern world, eating that much raw sugar would be an absolute metabolic disaster. Yet, look at the health of the Hadza: zero obesity, zero cardiovascular disease, zero type 2 diabetes. They maintain the exact same pristine metabolic health from their 20s well into their 70s. So how is this even possible?
Well, the secret isn't just the honey itself, it's what they're eating alongside it. There is a massive, completely unparalleled disparity in dietary fiber. The Hadza consume anywhere from 100 to 200 grams of wild fiber every single day, from tubers, baobab fruit, and wild plants. The average American? A measly 10 to 15 grams. That's not just a small gap, that is an entirely different digestive universe.
And all that wild fiber dramatically impacts the gut. A fascinating 2023 Stanford study by Justin Sonnenberg found that the Hadza diet supports an incredibly diverse microbiome. The average Hadza person carries about 730 gut microbial species, compared to just 277 for the average Californian. The researchers even identified 124 distinct microbial species in the Hadza that have simply vanished from industrialized populations. Their gut basically remembers a biological world that ours has completely forgotten.
And that leads us perfectly into our final section, Part 4, Ancient Software, Modern Hardware, the Biological Mismatch.
Let's pull back and look at the evolutionary timeline for a second. Richard Wrangham's famous 2009 hypothesis argued that cooking unlocked the heavy calories needed for our digestive tracts to shrink and our brains to grow. That kicked off about 1.8 million years ago. But there's a pretty huge problem buried in the dirt. The archaeological record shows that the earliest solid evidence of permanent hearths, meaning consistent everyday cooking fires, only dates back about 790,000 years.
So we're left with this glaring million-year biological mystery. If early humans didn't have consistent everyday fire for roughly a million years, how on earth did our shrinking guts process raw, tough food to feed our rapidly expanding, energy-hungry brains? What filled that gap?
The answer, it turns out, is predigestion. Long before they had the ability to consistently cook with fire, our ancestors used controlled putrefaction, fermentation, and deliberate decay to do the exact same biological job. They basically used rot, time, and bacteria to break down their food outside the body. This was an incredibly sophisticated, accumulated knowledge base built up over hundreds of thousands of years, and we just wiped it out with about 50 years of modern sanitation protocols. And the proof of this ancient diet is literally sloshing around inside your body right now. Back in 2015, North Carolina State University research revealed something you rarely see in standard nutrition textbooks. Human stomach acid is incredibly corrosive. Our acidity levels don't match pure predators, and they certainly don't match herbivores. They beautifully, perfectly match scavengers. We are biologically built and optimized to process meat that has been sitting out in the sun, gathering bacteria.
And this just perfectly captures the mess we're in today. Your body doesn't know what an FDI inspector is. It doesn't care about expiration dates. We are walking around with 2-million-year-old hardware, a stomach acid that can dissolve bone, a gut that evolved to partner with bacteria and rot, and it is desperate to run on ancient raw software. It expects massive amounts of fiber, fermented decay, and raw organs. But what do we feed it? Sterilized, pasteurized, shrink-wrapped data.
Just step back and look at the sheer scale of this shift. 120 years versus 2 million years. We have had modern food safety regulations, like the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, for a tiny, microscopic blip in human history. Compare that to the 2 million years our ancestors thrived, evolved, and literally built the human brain on food that would be entirely illegal today. Which leaves us with this final, striking thought. We've been eating approved food for one human lifetime, and we're still figuring out what we broke. Ultimately, when you look at all this data impartially, you really have to ask yourself, in our rapid, completely necessary quest to sanitize our modern diet, what fundamental parts of our ancient biology have we accidentally starved? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gives you something wild to think about during your next meal.